It's actually very easy to import purchase data for software and hardware from virtually any data source into KeyServer. All you need is a flat spreadsheet export like this one, with column labels in row 1 and individual entries in each row below, saved in a text or CSV format. When you import the data, KeyServer instructs you to map the column headers to fields in the KeyServer database. These field mapping instructions can then be saved for future use, so the next time you import from the same data source, you won't have to map them again. During the import, KeyServer will instruct you to clarify any ambiguous information, such as date formats, product references, or license metrics. And since it can remember your prior answers, you'll only have to answer once for each unique entry. Let's step through the process now, and I'll show you what I mean. This spreadsheet contains a single tab populated with data for 4 purchases, including 1 renewal for 500 lab device licenses for Adobe Creative Cloud. As I mentioned, the first step in the import process is to make sure your data is saved in either a TXT or CSV format. Once the file has been saved, simply drag and drop it from the desktop or folder into the Purchases window in Key Configure. When the import wizard opens, you're given the option to choose from a list of previously saved field maps, but in this case, we're going to create a new one. Give the field map a name, often based on the data source, and add a description if needed. Next, drag each column name from the right side of the window to the associated KeyServer field on the left. The field labels in the import tool are based on the labels given to the columns in the KeyServer database tables, so they may not perfectly match the labels you see in the Key Configure UI. Let's step through the columns in our spreadsheet and talk about each one. The first column label in our sample import is PO, and that maps to the purchase order ID field in the KeyServer database. The second column is called Date, and that maps to the order date field at the top of the list. The third column, Reseller, maps to Order Reseller. So far, so good. But this is where it can begin to get tricky if you don't know what you're looking for. The Product column does not map to the Product ID field. It actually maps to the X product name field near the very bottom of the list. These X fields are references to the products table of KeyServer, allowing you to link purchase records to a specific product definition for proper inventory and policy reconciliation. Our Description column maps to purchase description, and Count maps to purchase quantity, making this one another field that can be difficult to find because it's actually labeled Units Purchased in the Key Configure UI. Unit Price maps to Purchase Unit Price. License Metric, a very important field that's often missing, maps to Purchase Metric. And our Term field actually doesn't map to anything because KeyServer doesn't have a distinct field that records whether a license is a subscription or perpetual. Either it has a start and end date for subscriptions or it doesn't for perpetual. Our start and end columns map to purchase start date and purchased end date. And the invoice number column maps to purchase invoice. These represent the top 10 or so fields that most users import for purchase records, but you can see that there are many more options if you have the data. For a detailed description of each field, right-click anywhere in Key Configure and choose Help, then search for Tables in the top right corner of the Help documentation. Notice that all of the data in our spreadsheet is for independent, original, or subsequent purchases, and not upgrades to existing licenses. If your data includes upgrades, you'll want to make sure there's a column in your spreadsheet identifying those, which is mapped to the Purchase Entitlement Type field, where upgrades are recorded as addendums, which are dependent on prior purchases, to make sure that the tally of available entitlements stays accurate. Otherwise, you can update the purchase record for upgrades one by one after the import in the Purchase Details window. Once you have the fields mapped from the spreadsheet, click OK to save the map, make sure you have the correct instruction set selected, and then click OK again to begin the import. Whenever KeyServer discovers an ambiguous data point, such as a date or a product name, It will stop and ask you to clarify the format by selecting an option from a list. You also have the option to remember your selection so that you don't have to reselect it for every entry in a given field. A smart list of product definitions is given for each unique product name discovered in the import. Although some products come with upgrade and downgrade rights, it's best to choose the version recorded in the purchase order or invoice. The effective product version can be inferred later based on the upgrade rights expiration date when creating a policy to track or manage usage. A preview is displayed at the end of each imported row. Click Next to proceed one row at a time, or Complete to move forward with all rows. If another ambiguous data point is discovered, KeyServer will pause and allow you to select an option as usual. If the product you're looking for isn't listed, it's okay to move forward without selecting one. If necessary, you can create the product manually after the purchases have been imported and link it to the purchase record afterward. In those cases, the purchase will initially be named after the PO number instead of the product name, which makes it easier to identify them later. After the purchases from our spreadsheet are imported and saved, we can open the purchase details for each to review or edit them as needed. To quickly create a software policy that manages a product based on the data entered in a purchase record, click the arrow next to the word Summary, and then click Reconcile. Select the product on the left side of the Reconcile window, and then highlight the recommendation on the right. Click Apply, and a new policy will automatically be created to manage entitlements based on the license metric and start and end dates in the purchase record. Be sure to select No Enforcement if you do not want KeyServer to limit software usage to maintain compliance. There are additional policy features such as scope, group restriction, and license auto-assign controls not covered in this video, so if you're unsure of the impact your new policy will have on the computers on your network, it's best to stick to No Enforcement for now. When you're ready, use Control or Command S to save any changes. That's it for this video on importing purchase records. If you have any additional questions, search our help documentation for purchases or tables, or reach out to us at support@sassafras.com. Thanks for watching.